Hi guys, it is time for, now I know, very late again, the July prompt for one little word. There's a couple of reasons I'm only getting round to this now. One is that July just flew past and I kept putting it off and off, and eventually when I did sit down to look over the prompt, the idea I had for it required some new supplies, and I had to wait for those to arrive. So here we are, into August, doing July. The point is, I'm still doing July. When I read the prompt from Ellie, and she described it as creative meditation, and that's what I really wanted to focus on. That idea of really having a bit of fun with this one. And I know previously she's done it with acrylic paints, and this year she used watercolors, and I just wanted to do something a little bit different for me. I wanted to push myself out of my comfort zone a little bit, and lately I have been loving alcohol inks. I've been following a few people on Instagram, and it's such a beautiful medium, and I really wanted to give it a go. So these are what I've been waiting for. Totally available in New Zealand, but the colours and whatnot that I wanted weren't, so I picked mine up from scrapbook.com. I got a bunch of different colours sent over, and I will leave a link for everything I've used down below in the description box. And so I have had a little bit of a play, not a lot, but I do have an idea of what I want to produce, which is something similar to this. This was like the second or third attempt that I had with them, and I really enjoyed it, but obviously this is too small to fit in my notebook, so I want to create a larger version of this. So I'm going to clear off my desk and create that with you now.
So these are the supplies that I'm working with. I've got a hairdryer, I've protected my desk with just an old plastic bag, I've got my alcohol inks, some Yupo paper, I've got both blending solution and isopropyl alcohol. I've got a plastic palette that I'm using specifically just for alcohol inks, a couple of paintbrushes, I've got some paper towels for cleaning up, and when they say wear gloves, they mean wear gloves because the stuff stains. So like I said, I'm no expert on this, but this is how I did this piece. I first laid down a little bit of blending solution towards the middle of my paper, and because I'm creating a rainbow, I'm starting with the color that's going to be sort of in the middle of my rainbow. So I added a few drops of a pink colored alcohol ink, and then I'm just using my blow dryer on a low heat setting and a low speed setting to just sort of blow that around. It mixes, the ink mixes in with the blending solution and just back and forward, and it creates these ripples of color. And I'm doing that basically until the color is dry, and then I'm just going to repeat that same process but with a different color. So I'm moving up the page first, I'm going to go through an orange and a yellow, and then underneath that I'm going to do the same thing with a blue and a teal. Sometimes the color's a little bit lighter than I might have intended it, so I'm just adding another layer on top of it. The whole thing with this is it's going to be about just adding layers basically until it looks the way I want it to look, or at least close enough to the way I want it to look to stop. The alcohol inks don't necessarily blend together. They move each other out of the road. So the paper that I'm using does allow a little bit of absorption, but not a lot. So as you can see there, it just shifts the color around. So by adding plain blending solution or isopropyl alcohol on top of the colored ink that you've already laid down, it will remove that ink or lighten it, blend it around. So you do have to be a little bit careful. You can see on the right hand side here, it gets a little bit muddy when you mix some colors together, so you do want to be a little bit intentional with what colors you're putting next to each other. And obviously these inks that I've got, some of them are much darker than others. So for the pink and the light blue, for instance, I need to add a lot of that ink to get color. Whereas this teal, I only need to add a couple of drops into the blending solution to get this really intense color. So it is all just play, really, creative meditation, which was exactly what Ali intended for this this prompt this month, and so I'm really pleased that this was the way that I went, because that's exactly what it ended up being, not just on this particular piece, but in all the practice pieces that I've done. I followed a lot of YouTube tutorials, just Google, just search in YouTube for alcohol inks and just see how other people do it. And one thing that someone did say was that it is a little bit like a meditative process. It's a really calming thing to do, and I found that to be totally true. Now once everything, the sort of base layer is fully dry, you can see on the left hand side there the piece that I'm trying to recreate, and it's full of bubbly dot looking things. So I'm starting that process just by dotting drips of the blending solution down onto the colours that I've already laid out. And you can see there what I mean by the fact that it removes the colour, not completely, but it pushes the colour away. So you end up with these little outlined circles. I mean, they're not fully circles, but bubbles. That's what they look like to me. They look like bubbles. And then I'm sort of repeating the same process with a different sort of technique. I put a little bit of blending solution into the palette, and I'm using a fairly large paintbrush to just splatter that onto the page. So everywhere that the blending solution splatters onto that color, it's going to create these little bubbly shapes and just expand the ink. And I'm being mindful to try to keep drying it in between each one of these processes. As you put the ink down or the blending solution down, it will run into each other. So if it's not dry, then it will just sort of move into a sort of blob shape. And then I'm doing the same thing, but instead of using the blending solution, I'm going to use just dots of straight alcohol ink. I will start blending the alcohol ink on my palette with some blending solution or isopropyl alcohol to sort of tone down the color a little bit. Like I said, those darker colors are going to be a little bit too dark to just dot straight on here. And the whole rest of this is just me playing with those couple of techniques, dropping stuff onto the color, using the paintbrush to do splatters. You can use the paintbrush to just dab it onto the paper. And so I'm just gonna leave you to watch this creative meditation. You literally could keep going like this forever. It's, I guess, an exercise in learning when to say enough is enough as well. Here is a little bit of a close-up of the end result that I've got. I love it. I love this bubbly, colourful rainbow effect. It's fun to look at and fun to do. And so now that I've actually got my piece and I have let that dry as much as I can. The alcohol inks, especially in those thicker areas, do take a little bit of time to dry. Even with the hairdryer, they're still a little bit tacky afterwards. So I've just made sure that that is as dry as it can be. And now the worst part, I'm going to cut this up and put it into my notebook. Because I'm at the halfway point, I've started a new notebook for July's prompt, so I'm working on the sort of inside spread here, and I was just careful to trim this down so that I sort of missed the muddier piece on the right hand side, and I definitely will keep that other little piece that I cut off. It's too pretty to throw away. I'll use that for something else. So I'm just going to stick these into my book. I'm leaving the pocket page empty in the middle, and I'll show you why in just a moment. So I'm just gluing these down just with some double-sided tape just to make sure it stays nice and stuck in there onto the paper pages, just leaving a smallish gap in the middle so that everything folds nicely. And this definitely wasn't straight, so I did try to pull it off again and just trim it down a little bit. I'm trying to leave about 1/8 of an inch around all the sides. So it's the Yupo paper that I'm using is 8 by 10 inches, so it doesn't quite fill up the notebook there, and this way I just get a nice border around the outside. Now my plan for the pocket, I'm gonna do my stamping, I guess. Ellie did her stamping directly onto her painting. I actually don't want to. I don't know how it would react to the alcohol ink underneath, but also I don't want to cover up the prettiness that I've just made. So I'm going to do my stamping on a 3x4 card. I'm not doing a million different quotes or manifestos or anything like that. Just one which has been in my mind ever since I saw this effect on the paper, actually. Always my favorite quote from Dory. Thank you, Dory. Just keep swimming. That's my manifesto for the moment. We're in the middle of winter. Things are a little bit sort of laggy here, and I'm just trying to do the best I can and get through until better times. I've been sick for quite a while, and that is it's really getting me down, so I am just keep swimming, just getting through this. So that's what I'm stamping out. This is a stamp set from Cocoa Daisy, perfect sort of size for these 3x4 cards, and I'm using my Thickers guide just to try and keep things as straight as I can. And I'm using a new ink today that's Umbrella Inks, is it? And it's a lovely thick black ink, which is what I wanted. The card I'm stamping on is that sort of textured cardstock, so you can see the texture there sometimes when I don't fully ink up the stamp properly. And I'm trying to keep everything as centered on the card as I can, which that thicker guide really does help for that. So that's my stamping. I didn't want to go too crazy. Just one. I'm late enough with this prompt as it is without trying to do a million pages in here. One page is more than enough, and this one works for me. Now I'm just adding a tiny little piece of tape to this, and I'm actually sticking it to the outside of the pocket. You'll see why in just 1 second. I've already done my journaling on a second 3x4, so I'm sticking that to the back side of the pocket. And I'm going to stitch around this card. I could probably have stuck it into the pocket, not a problem. But what I want to do is add a little bit more texture and just a little bit more detail to what is otherwise a reasonably simple page. So I've just grabbed a cutting mat, just something solid so I'm not poking through into my artwork there, and a little punching mat and just a drawing pin, and I'm going to punch some holes through both pieces of card and my pocket. It's just going to make the stitching a lot easier. And then once I've got all of my holes punched, I'm going to thread up my needle, and I'm going to use some gold thread. I just wanted to add a little bit of sort of sparkle and shine to the page, plus there's a lot of other colours going on here already, so the gold's going to end up being a little bit like a neutral. And I am just making sure that I'm getting enough thread here to stitch all the way around the outside of this piece all in one go. I don't want to have to start and stop too many times, and just doubling the thread over and tying a knot at the end of the thread, and that's what's going to hold it in place as I do the stitching. And as far as the stitching goes, I'm just going to do a basic running stitch all the way around. It does take a little bit of time, I guess. Again, you could call this a sort of meditation. It does take a little bit of time, but I'm not doing anything particularly tightly, or it's just to roughly secure these two pieces of card to the pocket. And just to give a tiny bit of decoration to the cards. I mean, the reality is I could have stapled them on if that was, if the intention was just to keep them on. But I want to add a little bit of sparkle, a little bit of shine, and a little bit of texture. So the stitching does that. And once I get all the way around the four edges, then I can just tie a little bit of a knot at the end. I didn't manage to space my holes out correctly, so there's not quite a complete running stitch at the end, but close enough is good enough. I really just wanted to get this prompt finished and done.
And so that's it. Something pretty simple, which ended up taking me a really long time to just start. So it seems like that's the lesson for me every month, doesn't it? I wonder if I'll learn for August. August seems to be quite a writing heavy prompt, so maybe that one will be easier. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. Let me know if you've got any questions, bearing in mind that I am definitely no expert, but I'll try and answer anything I can. Otherwise, thanks for sticking with me, and I will see you again really soon. Bye guys.